Cathy O'Brien, you are a survivor of the MK Ultra CIA mind control experiments. You have three books, and in 1995, you gave a testimony of your experiences before Congress. It's a pleasure to have you on today.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate this opportunity.
So, you have an amazing story, and I feel that your story is even more important now because a lot of the things that you've been talking about for almost 40 years now, a lot of it is coming to fruition, especially when you see like the things going on with this Epstein cover-up, right? Where, at first it was people couldn't believe it was happening. Our government couldn't be involved in something like this. I mean, you've been talking about it for a long time. You're a victim of a prior version of this. And here we are watching it right before our eyes. So when you see this is going on, I mean, today, what are your thoughts with what's happening right now in the government with this Epstein thing?
Well, I know that this has been going on my whole life because I was used in the blackmail films as a little child on the Epstein Island of its time, Mackinac Island, Michigan. These kind of operations have been going on a long time, ever since we imported the Nazi and fascist scientists into the U.S. in the wake of World War II through Project Paperclip. With them came the formula for mind control. And that formula is the same, whether it's of an individual, a nation, a classroom, a military, a church, or the world. And trauma is the basis of it. They'd found there's no trauma more horrific on the human mind than sexual abuse of a child prior to age 5 while the brain is still forming. So, this pedophile agenda we're seeing, what we're seeing with Epstein Island, all of this is rooted back in a globalist agenda that's using mind control to usher it in. So, it's
It's
ultimately a mind control agenda, and it's one that's been very pervasive because people don't think to look for it, and mind control is an invisible menace.
and that's what we want to talk to you about. Get your, you've got an expertise in this being a victim, and you've written three books about this topic. And I don't even know if you saw today because it's kind of wild. But even just today, there was it was just reported that over the weekend there was the head of the cyber security for Israel was arrested on child trafficking charges or child sex abuse charge, something like this in Las Vegas. And that just happened today. And they let him go. He was second to, right under Netanyahu. So I mean, did you hear about that? I mean, that's actually literally happened today.
There's so much that continues to happen. And our biggest problem is we don't have a justice system. Our justice system has been compromised and corrupted for generations. It was all the way back in 1960. My father was caught sending child pornography of me through the U.S. mails. He was given immunity from prosecution if he would sell me into MK Ultra mind control. And I'm saying this to show that our court systems have been corrupted to allow for the proliferation of pedophilia and this mind control agenda my whole life. So it's no surprise to me to learn that at all, that this is still going on. Now we don't have a justice system. It's only gotten more and more corrupt. It's only been more and more compromised. Judges have been blackmailed and caught up in the whole ring too. So, when we do arrest somebody, what do we do with them? Where do we prosecute them? They own the system. So we've got a massive problem to unravel this globalist agenda that's been creeping in worldwide for generations now. And it's gonna take a lot of awareness by
It,
the people to understand what's going on.
and it seems like that, you've been screaming at the rooftops about this. There seems like,
Yeah,
there's been no change because you hear something like this that happened today where one of these heads of state is now being caught in a pedophile ring and they
yeah.
let him go and the FBI let him go back to Israel. And it really is how you talk about this, where they are involved in some other seedy sort of operation where this is part of how they operate. And I want to go back. Let's take a step back and kind of explain your story and talk about the MK mind control. Let's first let people know what MK Ultra is, because really the way it started was, I mean, back in like the 1950s, during the Korean War. I believe they were capturing spies, and this was and they were doing tactics to actually change the way they think. The CIA saw that this was happening because it was actually they blamed it on the Chinese Communist Party and said, "Hey, they're brainwashing our soldiers. Let's see if we can make a program here to apply these same tactics and see if we can use this here." And that was just the beginning under Allen Dulles, who was the head of the CIA then, of the MK Ultra mind control program. And we know now that we had Charles Manson was part of that program. He came out of that. Ted Kaczynski, and then numerous victims, and you're one of them. So tell us, about that program, how you know it, about how it came from Operation Paperclip, and it was really rooted in some sort of Nazi um, uh, research that came over to this country, and up until the point of how that this happened to you.
Yes, well, that's excellent. You're pulling that together with the brainwashing that went on in creating Manchurian candidates and everything else. We start putting these pieces together, and we see how the CIA took the formula for mind control that was brought into the U.S. through Project Paperclip, combined it with other information on brainwashing, combined it with what the Jesuits knew about the effects of trauma on the human mind through their Spanish Inquisition and the Crusades from so far back, to they were killing people who wouldn't cooperate with the church. And then the spoils of that war on humanity were the children. And all of a sudden, you got the Catholic orphanages were born. So they learned a whole lot about the effects of trauma on the human mind and how these little children who had been traumatized were easily led and manipulated. So the formula for mind control continued to grow. The CIA was rolling all this information together, adding technological, harmonic, vibrational frequency aspects to it, and creating a very powerful form of MK Ultra mind control. We look back on the when Project Paperclip happened in the wake of World War II, and right after that, the CIA was formed. By 1947, the CIA and the National Security Act was
And
formed.
let's pause for a second and make sure, because a lot of our audience won't be too familiar with Operation Paperclip. So Operation Paperclip was the CIA wanted to go ahead and recruit some of the German scientists that were working in for Nazi Germany. So they gave them amnesty, and they actually came over here and started our space program. Right in Huntsville, Alabama. So they brought over thousands of scientists. Warner von Braun, who started the head was the first head of NASA, is actually somebody that was accused and a known war criminal who has killed lots of Jewish people in his factories at the time. So he's a war criminal, and they brought these people over, and they were doing lots of tactics. And one of the tactics they were doing was, for the Hitler Youth, was this mind control, and that's Operation Paperclip. So okay, go ahead.
Absolutely. And people can research Project Paperclip for themselves, and they'll see the information on Werner von Braun and realize he was associated with Walt Disney. And you go, what does a child's cartoon have to do with NASA mind control? And we look back at that pedophile agenda again. And the Disney cartoons from the get-go were embedded with subliminals and harmonic programming of the subconscious mind to start accepting the sexualization of children and the pedophile agenda. So Walt Disney was complicit from the get-go. And we're starting to see how pervasive mind control has become and how widespread it is. People look at Disney today, they see people like Britney Spears and realize, wow, MK Ultra mind control. So it's almost synonymous with it now. But back then, it was just conditioning the generations to accept uh, this this globalist agenda that Adolf Hitler, George Bush, and Joe Biden termed the New World Order. It has other names now, but ultimately that was the original name. And the only way they could usher it in was through mind control of the masses. Since knowledge is our defense against mind control, the knowledge was suppressed, hence the National Security Act, because they didn't want us having the information on what mind control entails, because it's like knowing the the um, the secrets of a magic spell. If you know the magic trick, the spell is broken. It doesn't have any impact anymore. And it's the same with mind control. Once we understand it, it can't be used anymore. People will evolve with knowledge that is our defense against mind control going forward. But we got to get the information out there. And it's been deliberately censored for a long, long time in order to allow for mind control to proliferate.
And I'm glad that you brought up the first. I love that you say magic because it makes perfect sense because you know what? They're all into occultism. All these people going
Yeah,
back, they're all big fans of Aleister Crowley and going
yeah.
back even, they're part of these secret societies. And this is where all of their kind of satanic rituals are based out of. And they're into these, and that's why they involve children and they do these actual rituals, even to a high level. Even today, people are a part of these things. You see them part of these secret societies, whatever it may be, the names for them, but they are a part of them. And this was goes on behind closed doors. And you were, a big part of. You saw it firsthand with, Bohemian Grove. You were right there with it, and we'll get into that. But I want to touch on the Walt Disney thing for a second because I think it's really important because people have to know that this was embedded since day one at Disney. I mean, you've got a great movie out too that came up a couple of years ago, Trance, and you mentioned it in there that how J. Edgar Hoover actually spent time, he was the head of the FBI, and he spent time with Walt Disney multiple times there to strategize on how they can program influence uh, with kids through their cartoons. So they were looking at how we can use TV and programming. It was all very new back then. How can we use this to plant information? And if you look at what you see back then, you could pick up little clues and go, wow, this is a little kind of the innuendos, the sexual innuendos here are kind of not meant for children, right? But then you see today, what's your take on the evolution of this stuff in actual media today? Because we saw you could see it back in the children's Disney movies then. What's your take on how it has become today and the effects that it has done on the population?
Well, in the Hitler Himmler research, they found that after 3 generations, any knowledge base, abuse base, or belief system became autogenic in the brain. It was genetically passed down generation to generation. And they wanted to affect the generations. So they started with the subliminals in the Disney cartoons, and then they gradually became more and more overt. And as generations had been conditioned to it, nobody was really paying any attention or noticing that it was becoming more pervasive like it is today. Now it's pretty blatant. We have many ways that mind control is used in the media. Repetition is the most basic form of mind control. After three, after repeating 3 times, then it goes into the subconscious. And the subconscious feeds our conscious mind and tells it what to think. Our conscious mind drives our actions. And I think one of the most prime examples of that is when mind control masked as a virus was unleashed on the global population. How many times did we hear? Mask up, social distance, get the injection. Over and over, every place we went. That repetition programmed the subconscious mind and is a prime example of what the repetition has done over the generations of promoting this pedophile agenda, which again is a mind control agenda. Because when children are sexually abused or ritually abused, because ritual abuse, the satanic abuses, as blood traumas are very traumatic on the human mind too. These happen prior to age 5 while the brain is still forming. It shuts down neuron pathways in the brain. It's a defense mechanism of our brain that it shuts down neuron pathways, represses traumatic memory so the rest of the mind can develop and function normally. Well, after repeated trauma after trauma after trauma, the neuron pathways are shut down, and the conscious mind isn't firing properly anymore. Instead, people are literally being dumbed down and losing their free thought conscious awareness. This is what's being deliberately done. It's being done generationally so that we're born more compliant and dumbed down. It's a de-evolution of humanity when you look at it. The effect of it is absolutely so horrific, and they're promoting this, the pedophilia, out of people's ignorance of the effects of that trauma on the human mind. They don't know about that anymore because that information was deliberately suppressed under national security and kept from the education system, the mental health system, that medical community, and from the society as a whole. So that has allowed for this to take a strong hold on the deepest subconscious recesses of the human mind, because we forgot our birthright information and our defenses against it, because we've been deliberately let outside ourselves for so long to follow big government, big pharma, big tech, big cult to cult religion to tell us how to live our lives. We forgot to look within and where all the power really is. Because once we look within, it's game over. We remember who we are, why we're here, reclaim our own power. These puppet masters, these globalists, only have as much power as we give them or let them steal. And once we become aware, we won't let them steal it anymore. If they tried to impose another pandemic, mind control masked as a virus on the population, most of the population, the global population, would say no, because we learned the first time. So we're starting to evolve with knowledge, but we need a lot more information to get out there.
It really is scary though, even though there's been a lot of people that are starting to notice this. It's scary the amount of people are still think it's all conspiracy when it's blatant right in front of our face. Because back when you were a victim of this, when this was happening to you, I mean, you saw firsthand them do these rituals in like the Bohemian Grove. So explain what that is and how, I mean, how does the occult tie back into their sort of thinking and all of this, um, pedophilia and everything they're going through that they put people through
Well,
the mind control.
yeah, it's an extreme trauma base that makes it that people feel it's beyond their realm to affect. That if it's etherical, if it's aliens, that's another thing. Because if it's beyond our what we perceive to be our realm to affect, then we lose control over it. When in fact it's illusions created to lead us further and further away from our own power. I know from my experience in MK Ultra mind control that without free thought, there's no free will. Without free will, we don't have soul expression. When we lose our soul expression, we lose our discernment of truth. We lose our compassion for each other. We lose our ability to go within and align with the divine within, to gather the strength of the human spirit and the infinite power of love, to live our life's purpose, to live life the way it's intended. And it all begins to erode with losing our free thought. So, in that regard, mind control is a spiritual battle because it stops us from gaining our soul expression. When I was around these perpetrators deep in the Washington, D.C. swamp, being used on a White House Pentagon level, I know that their greatest fear is the strength of the human spirit. They know that when people remember that we have all the power, and they only have as much power as we give them or let them
Right,
steal,
right.
that it's game over. So that's why they'll use Satanism, why they're blatant with it. It's not as much that they believe in religious belief, satanic belief, as much as they believe in the power of the blood trauma over the human mind to give them access to the brain and stop the soul expression. So that's sort of like they can't possess the human spirit. It's too powerful. It's a higher frequency. It's a higher vibration. However we want to look at it, their darkness can't creep in on our light. It's our saving grace. It's our victory. But if we can't think to access it, then they can manipulate us all they want, and they can fake their power. So their power is an illusion based on our misperception of that they have all the power. They don't. We do. It's within us, but we got to remember that, and it begins with reclaiming our free thought.
And that's why they want to deaden your spirituality, pretend like it
Yes.
doesn't exist. They want
Yeah.
everything to be mechanical. They want you to be as removed from your soul as possible,
Yes.
so that they're easy. It's easier for them to do these tactics. I mean, now you see that that's why they're microdosing people with fluoride in the water. We know they don't care about your teeth.
Yes.
If they cared about your teeth, they wouldn't have everything in the grocery store be filled with fructose sugar and everything else. They don't care about your teeth. That's the other one. They want to keep you nutrient deprived because this is one of the tactics they use, starvation tactics, right? They want to, tell us about that. Is that something that you noticed too? They use these starvation tactics, nutrient deprivation, right?
Absolutely. It's part of the formula for mind control that came over with Project Paperclip as sleep, food, and water deprivation. And the anything that deprives our brain of the proper nutrients and proper rest keeps it from firing properly. Mind control needs to shut down neuron pathways, whether it's through trauma, and even like 911, it causes the conscious mind to freeze in fright, leaves the subconscious mind wide open to being easily led and manipulated. They're shutting down neuron pathways, and they need, if we have food that lacks nutritional value, if our water is tainted, if we work 9 to 5, 5 to 9, to put food on the table that's bioengineered and genetically altered to deliberately starve our brains, and drink water that's pumped full of chemicals, we're not getting the proper firing in our brain. So it's more ways that they're using to dumb us down. When we understand that, we see why the attack on our food is so strong right now. Why why our food is being bioengineered and tainted the way that it is. It's to starve us very deliberately so our brains don't fire properly.
Yeah, and the reason why it's gotten worse over the years because they have done more research into it. So that's why you see it's
Yeah,
done through the masses. And these are all, some research that was done, through DARPA in back in the 70s and early 80s when they were doing yeah, back even before then when they were making things like Agent Orange and looking for chemical warfare. They were
yeah,
researching how to manipulate the mind with different tactics. And then they spread that throughout the rest of society. They don't make it noticeable. They sell it in different ways. That's why they're all colluding with these, big companies, and we definitely know they collude with the media. The Operation Project Mockingbird, I believe it was called back then,
yes,
right where they got into the media, right, and were able to put the messaging out there. So I heard one thing that you mentioned earlier. I want to touch on because this is something that they did develop back then, and it was mind control through frequencies. So what do frequencies mean to the human body, and how does that aid into mind control tactics?
Well, if we they want to shut the neuron pathways in the brain down, and they found they could vibrate those neuron pathways with audible and subaudible frequencies that started being embedded in the music very strongly in the 1970s, about 1970. Um, Up until then, the music was more about freedom and and that direction, and it took a dramatic change. And instead of promoting um, marijuana like the 60s was doing, marijuana was very much demonized because it has mind expanding properties that opens neuron pathways in the brain. So that herb became completely demonized, medicinally and otherwise, because they needed to shut down neuron pathways, and it opened it. So in the music, they actually were embedding and promoting cocaine. Think how strong that came into the music scene and into the music industries as of like around 1970, because they were taking it over to use that, which doesn't allow the brain to fire properly, and was used in a very different way. But they wrote all that in. They're socially engineering society on so many levels through the harmonics and the frequency and the music to manipulate the minds of the population.
And it's been proven. So they did find out back then that certain level of EMF waves, so
Yeah.
frequencies, even microwaves, can actually alter, people's brains. So they can actually send signal. And there was this is something that people can look up to. It was called the Havana syndrome, and that was when they discovered that at the time the Soviets were sending a signal into a U.S. embassy, and people were getting sick. And they said, "Well, how is this happening?" And they said, "Oh, we didn't know this was even possible." So they took that, altered it, and now use that on the American public. So they very much know which frequencies can actually alter your thoughts. And when you think about how, why do we listen to the MP3 when it sounds worse than even the remember the CD and the tape? It's like, why are we going backwards? Well, there's a reasoning behind all of this. They know that certain frequencies are going to alter your mood and your behavior because your body resonates at a certain tone. So it's very nefarious. And you know I want to know this because when you came out with this information, right? I mean, what was the initial reception? So first let's let people know how you escaped. You had Mark Phillips, who came and was able to actually help you get out of this program and realize what was happening. Can you tell us about your story of getting out and freeing yourself from this slavery?
Yeah, well, I was turning 30 and was going to be killed and eliminated because I'd been exposed to so many secrets, and they wanted to make sure that I died with those secrets, which is really what um, the sacrifices are about at Bohemian Grove, is getting rid of MK Ultra slaves around age 30, and so that they die with the secrets. And I was to be killed that way. And Mark Phillips knew about it. Mark was working the highest levels of intelligence, mind sciences, to preserve the sanctity of free thought. He saw mind control being used on the whole population. He saw how innocent citizens like myself were being used in the highest levels of MK Ultra and White House Pentagon levels. He saw little children being taken in and out of the White House. He was livid. He was he found information on our own birthright mind brain function buried under national security. He couldn't release this information because he was bound by laws of sedition, but he could do something about it. And how fortunate for me, he lifted my daughter and me right out of the Washington, D.C. human trafficking swamp while I was being transferred to my demise over at Bohemian Grove. He intercepted and handed me keys to my own mind. He reminded me of that birthright information. So I was able to heal from within myself from the information that Mark reminded me of. And I'm so fortunate that he did, because a lot of people look outside themselves for healing, when in fact, we have the most resilient body, mind, and spirit within us. We have the capacity for healing. We just need to remember to access it. And Mark reminded me of that. So I was able to heal from within and begin speaking out in 1990. So all the way back then, I had already opened the neuron pathways in my brain by writing out the trauma, that the the trauma, that was shut, the neuron pathway shut down around it, repressed it. Now I needed to take that emotionally incomprehensible trauma, shift it over to logic, and it takes the logic, critical analysis part of the brain to move a pen. A keyboard does not do the same thing. Pen and paper, the old fashioned way. So Mark told me, he said, pick up a pen and paper and write out what you're seeing. So that shifted the emotionally incomprehensible trauma over to logic, where it was consciously seen on paper. All of a sudden, healing happened psychiatrically, psychologically, emotionally, spiritually, everything all at once through this one simple little brain trick. When we understand the importance of moving that pen, we understand why writing by hand was taken out of the school system. If we put writing by hand back in the school system, that will stop the indoctrination of our children. That alone will teach them how to think again instead of what to think. And this is what Mark had taught me, that gave me the strength to be able to start speaking out so early on. And I needed to on my daughter's behalf and needed to get help for her. So I was speaking out for her from the very beginning.
And your daughter, it's multi-generation because your daughter ended up also becoming a victim of this same program. She was born into it.
Absolutely. She was born into it and then thrust into the corrupted child protective services. The system has been structured to as a catch net operation for trafficked children. And she had been trafficked. And so when she was in a hospital with a horrific situation, they just took custody of her because that's what they do. And people are experiencing more and more that the child protective services system is very corrupt. The family courts are very corrupt and give children back to abusers. They put them in the system and traffic them further. Absolutely horrific. So I saw this corrupt system being structured, and then my daughter was thrust into it. So it was love for her that compelled me to start speaking out and bring the information to light. And Kelly is my daughter. Kelly is the most amazing person. Not only did she heal from MK Ultra mind control, but she had the compound felony of then being thrust into that corrupted system and removed from Mark and me and from love and healing more. But she knew that we were fighting for her. She knew the love, and that carried her through. Well, she's amazing today, and I think she is the ultimate example of the resiliency of body, mind, and spirit. Because after all she's been through, she's amazing. She's brilliant. She's intelligent. She's funny. She's wise, and she has an ability to understand what in the world is going on um, because of what happened to us. We know that we're very close now, and she spends most of her time in nature, around animals, and away from devices, away from keyboards. And that's something that we all need to start thinking about and considering. She's a brilliant example for us all.
Does she also talk publicly about what happened?
She chooses not to. She's just kind of behind me going, "Go, mom," because
Yeah,
she'd much
let you.
rather. Yeah, she's having too much fun just living her freedom and and
Be,
enjoying nature and
be,
animals.
Yeah, because what you went through wasn't that great because you figure you come out like this, you gave your testimony before Congress, and what was the initial reaction after that? What was the feedback that you got from general public after that happened?
Well, when I first started speaking out, people didn't have any point of reference for understanding. They didn't know there was a swamp in DC. They didn't know that children were being sexualized. They didn't know what mind control was. These are more household words now that people are far more aware of. And so in 1990, people didn't have that point of reference. By 1995, my testimony for Congress was censored under national security because Bill Clinton was in the office of president. He certainly didn't want that information out since so much of my testimony exposed he and Hillary Clinton. You started this out talking about the person in Netanyahu's, that's so high up that was set free. Look at the Clintons. They have been, the evidence against them is overwhelming. It's so overwhelming that the evidence in my 1995 testimony for Congress, Transformation of America, was censored under national security. They're not going to censor, they're not going to use national security to censor a theory, a conspiracy theory, like they want to call it. They use it to cover up facts. So, national security has been allowing for these criminals to proliferate for a long, long time. To me, when that happened, um, I realized I would never see conventional justice. And I have only been aiming for the ultimate justice of positive change through public awareness, because it's going to take a global great awakening. And people everywhere need to wake up from mind control in order to understand what these criminals have been all about, in order to understand how our system's been corrupted by their blackmail operations and their mind control, to understand that we don't have a justice system to prosecute these criminals through. It's up to each and every one of us to wake up, gather our strength of spirit, and start making a difference right where we are, because um, that's the only justice that we'll ever see. I have more hope for that justice now, and that people are waking up on such a grand scale, but we still have a ways to go.
Well, yeah, and it seems like, right now people are finally starting to believe what you've been saying
Yes.
because now it's right in front of our eyes. And you
Yeah.
can't, they can't gaslight us and say that this isn't happening right for us. All these pedophiles aren't getting away with this. And 2,300 people disappear every single day, right? Where do these people go? Right? They're gone missing every day, and look how many children go missing, and doesn't even make the news. So tell us
Right.
about
People
that.
are onto it now.
Yeah, well, like just today in the news
I'm
when we
so
saw this
glad.
this guy from Israel.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's good that people are finally seeing it, and it's like my daughter Kelly was saying the other day. She said, "Yay, people are waking up. They finally, we've reached the critical mass. We got more people that are awake." She said, "But now they have a long way to go to catch up on exactly what it's going to take to unravel the depth of corruption that has been, embedded throughout our society. We have a good ways to go, I think, before any of us are going to see any actual justice. We've got an administration in right now that exposed the swamp, that exposed their funding mechanism, this globalist funding mechanism of drug and human trafficking. And exposed the child sex trafficking blackmail apps. This is absolutely amazing. But that's not enough. While they're trying to clean up this deeply rooted, corrupted system, it's up to each and every one of us to do our part, because the swamp doesn't drain from the top down, it drains from the bottom up. We all have to do our part, clean it up in our own community, in our own backyard, in our own homes. Get this mess cleaned up, because that's ultimately what it's going to take. It's been a spiritual warfare on the whole global population. And it's going to take individual realization of that and a great awakening by everyone in order to make the necessary changes, because like politics can't clean this up for us. Big government's been doing it to us. It can't clean it up for us. We have to do it ourselves.
Yeah, and it really has to be, a humanity effort, and to hear people's
Right.
stories like yours and actually start taking some action, get away from this divisiveness and kind of look at things analytically, what's really going on. So after you came out and you gave this story, I mean, people immediately branded you as conspiracy theorist. You were, it's like, you mean you're an author, you're a mother, there's lots of things going on in your life, but conspiracy theory seems to be synonymous with Cathy O'Brien. When that happened, when you came out, you told your story and it wasn't believed, and they put this label on you. I mean, what was your reaction to that? Because that had to be hard to deal with.
Well, not at all. I was expected because when we look back at the Kennedy assassination, that is the national trauma that traumatized the nation. That's when these perpetrators took control. We look in the wake of the Kennedy assassination is when we got the electronic voting machines. Those electronic voting machines were rigged since their inception to place people in key positions of power. But in order for this globalist agenda to take root within our government, they needed to get Kennedy out of the way. So they got Kennedy out of the way in front of the everyone. How, I say Kennedy assassination, everybody sees the bullet because that's what the media showed us repetitively over and over and over again. Then we had the Warren Commission that covered up the Kennedy assassination. Gerald Ford was head of that Warren Commission. Right after that, he was placed in the office of president. He was the unelected president of the United States. And you look at his cabinet, he had George Bush to head the CIA, Dick Cheney, Donald Rumsfeld, who gave us aspartame, the first artificial sweetener to dumb us all down. He had Henry Kissinger, Nelson Rockefeller. He had, with Henry Kissinger, everybody can research for themselves. Ford and Kissinger put in the first depopulation agenda. And he had Jack Valenti, head of the Motion Picture Association of America, as his press secretary. Jack Valenti is the one who, from his lofty perch in Hollywood, decided what we would see on our TVs. He decided we would see that bullet going into the head over and over again. He decided then, he is the one who came up with the term conspiracy theory. If anybody questioned the repetitive media narrative, they were called a conspiracy theorist. That's where that came from. It is a label for anyone who questions the media narrative, anyone who questions this globalist agenda, and certainly anyone who exposes it like I did. It's absurd to have called me a conspiracy theorist, but Wikipedia, put that out there first thing that that's what it was. There was no changing it. There nobody could do anything. They were going to label me with that to try to discredit me right from the get-go. Well, that is so silly when you look at it logically. When national security was invoked on my testimony, did the government really invoke national security on a conspiracy theory? And a theory cannot consist of proven testimony that has been validated by Secret Service, intelligence, law enforcement. It's the evidence is overwhelming. It's all right there. So, I'm not the least bit concerned about it. I was also never concerned if someone didn't believe my testimony when I shared it, because I considered it seeds of truth planted. I didn't need validation from outside myself to know my own truth, since I had healed from within, diffused all triggers, opened those neuron pathways. I knew my own truth. So um, I don't have a problem with what anybody thinks of me at all because I'm strong in who I am, and I'm determined with all that I am to get this truth out there because it's affecting everyone. It has affected everyone. And when they stop worrying about these silly labels that they put on people, then we can all just be authentic and not worry about what others think of us anymore. It's so shallow.
You're right. But we put way too much concern on what other people think about us, and there's probably people you don't
Yeah.
like anyway. So what do you so what do you care? Uh, you know, and it kind of is very sad. I mean, because you do get vindication because of the things that we're seeing today with this Epstein Island. You go, oh my God,
Yeah.
I cannot believe this is true. I cannot believe the cover up. I can't believe there was an island like this. But you've been saying this now for it's been 40
Right.
years, and they were labeling you conspiracy theorists. But then we look at all the tactics, and it seems to just continue. This blackmail operation just seems to be part of their game plan, and they're only looking for more ways to manipulate the public. So
Yes.
I want to ask you one more thing too, because I know that you are you do know a lot about what they did with the actual education system. Um,
Yes.
because one of the things they actively were doing was, trying to, again, dumb down the public. And there was an actual like, agenda. They called it like Education 2000 or something like this, where they wanted to switch from having people take, critical thinking to more of, answer by multiple choice. I saw that in your video. Can you explain a little bit of that, how that works?
Yeah, the global education program was based on the Hitler's youth and what was taught in Nazi Germany. Again, mind control is key on it, and they wanted to find a way to be able to manipulate the minds of the children and teach them what to think rather than how to think. So they went to, yeah, that, like the multiple choice, because you don't research that. It's just a, like, headline news and snap judgment, all this uh, lack of critical thinking. And it was taken out too when they quickly removed the um, writing by hand from the school system and put computerization in where there was the keyboards. This all happened in 1984. I was working under Education Secretaries Bill Bennett and Lamar Alexander at that time. Um, Lamar Alexander was a blatant Satanist, and um, uh, Bill Bennett was a Jesuit. No difference between the two, as far as I'm concerned. Both were using manipulation of the mind to dumb down the population. So they put the global education program into the school system. It changed names, like so often happens with anything once it's discovered. Um, it changed names and it's called Common Core now. They'll probably change it to something else, but ultimately, parents are getting really fed up with it. And they saw their children were being indoctrinated when they sheltered at home 2020, when mind control masked as a virus was unleashed. These perpetrators were so desperate to get control over the minds of the population in 2020 that they made a big mistake. They had people shelter at home, which broke their routine patterns. If you break routine patterns, you force your brain to fire in new ways. Again, mind control shuts down neuron pathways, and they had a shelter at home and open neuron pathways. So when they broke the routine patterns and people were expanding their thinking, they started seeing what was going on in the education system. They saw how the children were being indoctrinated, how they were being sexualized, how history had been rewritten. They started noticing those those changes. Where we go from here, I'm happy to see our the Department of Education being dismantled so that it goes back to the states. If it goes back to states, it goes back to communities. It goes back to communities. It goes back to parental rights. We need to have our PTAs again, the Parent Teacher Association, where the parents are actively involved in the system. If we're going to have a school system when we're not homeschooling, then we need to be actively involved in that system. So the change is happening as people became more and more aware. I think when I was speaking out in the early 90s, one of the first things that had people interested in what I was saying was the indoctrination of children in the school system. They already saw that the children were being programmed, that history had been rewritten, that constitutional values were being eroded. They saw all that happening. It was one of the first things people saw. So, hopefully that's going to be one of the giant steps forward, is to restore free thought into the school system and get people researching again. Instead of snap judging social issues, research what in the world is really going on and cross-reference information, like we used to have to do. Pick up a book, you know.
Yeah. Well, Kathy, you know what? You've got, so much great information to share for people if they want to actually heal from trauma too. You wrote, three great books. So, where should we send people to get to buy your books and to support what you're doing?
They can go to my website at trance-formation.com. That's TRANCE-formation.com. It's got all my books listed there. My books are also available on Audible. They're secured. I read them myself, to preserve the integrity of information. I strongly recommend people go directly to my website for the links and the information there, because free ebooks have been deliberately altered. They've been pirated, posted all over the internet. Truth not only is censored, it's altered and diluted, so we got to be aware of that and be careful, be mindful of what you're reading. Then, as you read those books, cross reference it, research it further, because the more you know, the more you see how absolutely inexcusable it is that we allow these unelected, self-appointed, self-anointed leaders to manipulate our brilliant minds and lives anymore. We can all reclaim our free thought. I posted the methods I use there that are, a reminder of our birthright information. It's PTSD, Time to Heal. People can get it on my website. They can download it with a pay what it's secured with a pay what you can if you can option. So they can have it regardless of income. They can zero out costs. Most people do. Just have the information, reclaim your free thought, learn to think again.
Kathy, this is fantastic. Thank you so much. What you're sharing is so important, especially today, for people to, become awake to what's going on. I'll put the link in the show notes. Really, really appreciate you talking to me today.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you.